Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a July 25th edition of the MSP Initiative, MSP Talk. We're right in the thick of summer, and before, it's almost August. Like, did it just blow by? I think so. But before we get into all the good stuff, let's just go through some general housekeeping because, this is what we do. MSPinitiative.com. This is everything that we do here. You can check it out. Once you learn how to spell the word initiative, the rest comes easy. Click on sessions. This very session that we are on is being recorded, and it will be added to this page in a podcast and video format. So if you're driving, I suggest the podcast one. We have an in-person event. We parked our tour bus from the last couple of years, and we are now doing an event called MSP Community Minds. It is August 14th and 15th in beautiful and not super hot Denver, Colorado. We have a bunch of familiar faces, hopefully, from around the industry, experts, if you would. We will be doing panels with MSP business owners, and then we'll be doing workshops with some of the experts from around the industry. So, like, not death by PowerPoint. We want you to actually start something with somebody that knows what they're doing and be interactive, right? You want to talk legal with Brad Gross? Awesome. Bring your contract with you. Maybe you can start to figure out what's missing. You want to get, security with Matt Lee? Awesome. Jump in and learn how, I think his session is the worst day in the life in MSP. You want to learn organizational stuff. You want to learn marketing, sales, strategic stuff. It's all there, right? So this is a totally educational event for you, the MSP. This is what everyone that we talk to asks for. It's absolutely 100% free to register for this event as an MSP. There's no $4.99 early bird registration. So please join us there. Then, and we love these, right? The MSP community block parties. We've done a ton of these all over the world now. Earlier this year, we did London, Prague, most recently Dublin. We have 3 coming up here. The MSP community boat party in Fort Lauderdale in conjunction with our friends from the Taylor Business Group. They're running an event called the Big Conference. That's an MSP focused conference as well. You don't actually have to be going to the conference to just be in South Florida and be an MSP and jump on the boat. 5-story mega yacht based out of Fort Lauderdale. We did this last year. It was awesome. Looking forward to it again. Then we have DattoCon Miami coming up here in like first week of October. So we'll be doing something that's literally a 5-minute walk away from the host hotel. And lastly is the Orlando end of the year blowout special. Last year, we flew in the All-American Rejects as our entertainment for you, the MSP community. We'll be announcing our act, if you would, coming up shortly here. Another radio recognizable band. And if you were jamming during the late 90s, early 2000s, you will be very happy. We have some community offers from companies from around the industry that are just trying to hook you up. So check that page out when you get a chance. And then we have our industry calendar, which is just our homework, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in the industry. Sometimes we have it in here, sometimes we don't. If we're missing something, feel free to submit it. And like that way, everybody's like running off of good information. So that is all the housekeeping. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff happening in MSP land. And quite frankly, it's exciting stuff. This is all part of the ebb and flow. And if you never leave your office, house, basement, backseat of your car, do something different. The amount of information that you get just by networking with other people that do what you do is absolutely outstanding, which brings me to our special guest for today's session, Mr. Tim Coach. I mean, he's rocking the beard. I mean, few rival that beard in the industry, let's be honest.
And well, it's because they all cut theirs off last year, right? Like I had a head start.
Yeah, Tim was like, nope, I'm good. Beard's feeling pretty good. I'm going to leave it where it's at. Although some of those people have grown their beards back, was actually pretty impressive. Like 6 months later, I was like, wow, did you even cut that? Oh, okay, cool. When I had hair, it used to grow up, not down. I digress. Had the fro rocking for a long time. Funny enough, I didn't get stopped in TSA as much when I did have the fro. Maybe there's something to that. Anyway, I've run into Tim on many continents. He is definitely a world traveler, and he loves to be on the road. He is at PIA. I'm going to have him first for anybody that hasn't met Tim. I'm going to let him kind of tell us his history, right? He's had a pretty cool journey through IT land. I like to give everybody's background going into these because, like, then you know that, like, they didn't just sign up for a job. yesterday they were selling hot dogs in the corner. Today, they're trying to sell something else. So I don't think that's the case here. I'm going to let Tim kind of give you his history through, like if that goes all the way back to your MSP days, Tim, or before then, give us a walk down history or journey down your lane there, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so no worries. So George, thanks for having me on. As always, it's great. I'm sure we'll get into some other city banter later on in the podcast. But yeah, so what's my history? So I grew up. So let's like funny facts about Tim. Tim grew up in a small town that no longer exists. So if you watch any like ghost towns of America or most contaminated towns in America, I guarantee you my hometown is in the top 3 every time. So it was a lead mining community. It was huge back in the 20s and 30s, and obviously just depleted. So grew up there, went to the military for several years, got out, tried the whole work thing, and I'm like, I really don't like working with my body. So I decided to go to school. And then out of that school, went to IT. So that's where I first was introduced to IT. I actually went to be a CPA. And then about half a class later, I'm like, this sucks. Like, who wants this? So talked to the college counselor, and they're like, have you ever thought about computers? And I'm a fairly mechanical person. So it's like, well, that makes sense to me. So that's how I got into computers so many years ago. Interned at the Harley Davidson dealership here or the factory, excuse me, here in Kansas City. And then started down that way. Well, as most internal IT people, right, I had an MSP that helped me out. So my environment was fairly massive on a countrywide scale. And like most MSP or, clients, the MSP wasn't delivering on what I needed to deliver to. The sales guy was great. The tech side couldn't keep up because that's back in the day when we ran all of our techs into the dirt. You got to work an 8-hour day, and then I want to give you a little time for a cheese sandwich, and now you got to go do projects. So fired that MSP, and not shortly thereafter, the owner of that MSP was like, well, you think you're pretty big for your britches, why don't you come on over here and try to run an MSP? And I'm like, I've been in the military. I've done, hazardous waste removal for the government. Like, how hard can this actually be? And little to my understanding was how hard it actually was. I'd always say on the best day at an MSP is control chaos.
Yeah.
Right. On the worst day, just close the doors, order in pizza and beer, and hopefully everybody survives the night. So did that for a hot term. And as most people do in my position, you become an advocate for your vendors. So basically rebuilt a whole bunch of MSPs with a partner of mine, Joe, and decided I'm tired of doing that. It's time to do something different. Made the call, and that's how I ended up in the channel. And then shortly thereafter, a global channel chief for a company out of Australia by the name of PIA, which stands for Predictive Intelligent Agent, not pain in the ass. But I mean, I can spin that. Obviously, I'm a speaker. That's what I do.
I never knew that's what it stood for, by the way. Like, but I'm learning already. So some of the most successful companies in the sandbox, I like to call it, actually came up, from the MSP up rather than from like enterprise down, right? We all know there's a ton of companies that try and come down from corporate America, the publicly traded guys, right? And like they come down and try and fit into the sub 500 employee category. And I mean, I would think a 5-employee company and a 500-employee company will look completely different. I digress, but that doesn't always go well, Tim. And we've seen a lot of companies come into the sandbox and like 12 months later say, this didn't go as fast as we wanted to. We're just going to bail and go back to, mid corporate America, and like we're going to bail on IT channel MSP land. So I'm fond of the people that like were in the trench, right? They found the gap, right? They're like, how come somebody didn't solve this problem? And then they went out, they said, nope, it's not there. And they said, okay, let's build it, right? Let's fix the problem because nobody else has. And like we've seen really successful companies, come from that mindset. Tell us a little bit about the way PIA started, right? Like, sounds like it started that way, right? Out of an MSP. What were they out to solve for? And like, where did they, what ultimately resulted in PIA being created?
Yeah, so it is a quite interesting story, right? Because like the main people all have like a deep history. Like one of the guys in the company, everybody that now runs the company used to work for that guy at an MSP, right? So it's certainly a crazy story. So bunch of developers, bunch of IT guys, they all work together. They all went their different ways. Matter of fact, the owner decided he was going to be a restaurateur because he has of Italian heritage and allegedly knows how to make pizza, right? So guy opened up some pizza shops, and later on down the road, he's like, not really my gig. I kind of like this IT thing better. So him and his buddies started an MSP. So that's what they all knew. That's where they went back to. They started at MSP. And then Christian, who is the owner and founder, is a very business-minded, tech-driven person, right? So he's not thinking about today. He's thinking about tomorrow and the next day and how it goes down. So he wanted a massive MSP. So at this point, they're like, it's like a 9-figure MSP. There's 350 employees that work for it. But the way they got there was primarily through acquisition. So as they were acquiring these companies, anybody that knows acquires a company, like getting your ROI back or getting your EBITDA back to where you were it's just horrific to get there because you got to figure it out. So their problem was essentially the help desk. Like, how do we get our technicians that we know are efficient helping these clients much faster? And obviously the way they came up with that was like, okay, well, we just need to automate a whole bunch of these little menial day tasks that just fill your help desk up every day. Right? Well, in our world, as we know from being in the MSPs, we used to do a lot of that through workflow in our PSA or RMN. We used to do a ton of scripting. We still do a ton of scripting. Like, we did all of this stuff, but nothing was really just proactive or fast enough in the process of doing it. Well, they also had a client at the time that was primarily insurance. So the problem, as we all know, is when you have a natural disaster, these companies buy, or they basically hire mass amounts of skilled labor to come in and fix whatever area they're from. Well, because of the requirements to work for an insurance company, it took them like 6.5 hours per person to set up.
Wow. That's
right. So, I mean, just a huge time suck, huge cost. So they're like, how do we make this better? So they had this kid that they hired. I mean, the story is, I don't know if the story's quite true. I hear rumors, but I can't pinpoint the guy down. So the story is the guy was, they got called in by a high school, and they're like, we really need your help. We got this problem. So they go into school. It turns out this kid has like complete control of everything. Passwords, tests, like the whole, like, this guy's got control, right? And so they figure out who the kid is, and in his wisdom, Christian goes up to the kid and he's like, this high school thing doesn't really seem to be your gig. So how about you come over here and then we figure all this out in the process. So that's how the founding architect, rumor is, allegedly came to work for the company. But Christian went to him and said, hey, is there a way that we can figure this out? Like, we can make this better. And of course, Aaron's like, he's one of those kind of uber geeks, the one that even like the geeks get around and they're like, this guy's kind of next level. So Aaron's like, yeah, I got this. So what happens is the guy ends up writing an enterprise level AI engine. And they're like, okay, well, that's cool. Where do we go from there? So then they start saying, okay, well, we got 10,000 tickets on how to create a new user. What's the most efficient way that we can do that? And then through the research, they came up with a script that does that. But a script still takes a human to kind of process and to do things. What they figured out is they could take the AI engine and have it actually perform the task. So as a response of building all of this out to really kind of get through the minutia of the help desk, they got those 6.5 hour tickets down to about a half hour. And now they're like, okay, that's cool. Because if we look at it, if we take off our tech hat and we put on our business hat, our biggest cost against profitability is labor.
Yes.
So if you can make your labor more efficient, you can become more profitable without adding more humans. I'm not saying get rid of your humans. I'm saying have your humans do more important crap than password resets, right? We all know this. So once they had that down there, it's like, oh, what's next on the list? What's next on the list? So eventually they've gotten to the point where 50% of the help desk at VITG or virtual IT group is done by the PIA product, right? So they've had this thing going for a couple of years. And what's really neat about it is they now have non-technical people and have had that for about a year or so, a little bit more than a year, actually doing help desk. So when you think about the ability to open up your hiring pool to non-technical talent, so you're moving your cost of labor down, but you're increasing your customer satisfaction because you're more consistent. The people are friendly. Let's face it, technical people tend to have a hard time in relationships, right? Not as much now as they used to, but it's like I'm providing consistency. I'm providing a better interaction. I'm doing it faster. And then essentially what comes to be is the owner's brother is a plumber. And he's like, I'm tired of this, right? We could go on to the crappy kind of details of his day, pun intended. But he's a plumber and he's like, man, I'm done with this. You got something for me? And he's like, yeah, come in. I'll show you this, show you how to do it. So he puts him on the help desk. A couple minutes later, he calls his brother up and he's like, dude, I just did a ticket, like no technical knowledge at all. So it's like, oh, so now we don't need technical people to do kind of that first line, kind of the redundancy. We need technical people to actually focus on technical problems. So that's how it came to be that PIA became a solution that where we could bring in other people, relationship talent, good personalities to work on the service desk and still take care of that minutia of the day. That's how they got to 50% of their help desk. And essentially they showed this, they're part of other organizations. They showed it. And they're like, oh, it's great. And they were like, hey, bottom line is you guys need to release this to the masses. So come Thursday of this week will be the official first birthday of PIA being released to the masses on in the channel program. Now we're about 400,000 endpoints at this point, right? We're spread across APAC, EMA, the US market. It's the great thing about it. Now it is primarily English speaking at this point, but currency, language, all that stuff comes down the road. But it's been really well received because we've moved into true AI, which means we're using machine learning models, right? We push stuff through machine learning models. We've looked at language, the language barrier and how to do machine learning and how to take care of that natural language process, right? We've gone from just RPAs, which are great, don't get me wrong, they help the MSP out quite a bit, but there's still the workflows behind the RPA that make them work. Whereas now what we're doing is we're taking a product and we're actually having the AI read it and then show you the solution and then perform the solution. So that's how it goes from some guy that owned 3 pizza shops to a 9-figure MSP to now a solution SaaS provider. Because part of the issue that we see as MSPs, and you know this as well as anybody does, is we get sold something, right? We go to these shows, we find some great tech, and they're like, oh man, it's great. I gotta take it back. I give it to my crew. And then what you find out is your crew has to manage and maintain it.
Yeah.
They have to feed it. Whereas a SaaS solution, right, is something they just get to use. So although, you get an Azure instance in the country of your origin, or that you're, utilizing the product in, although, you have scripts and you have the ability to create your own scripts, the reality of it is we're doing all that for you. So it confuses me when somebody gives me a task or a solution that takes the workload off of my lowest cost technical asset and puts it on my highest cost. Did I
Right.
really do anything there, or did I just shift the work to a higher cost?
Yep. It's imbalanced for sure. It's really interesting. By the way, I love that story. Especially the brother who was a plumber, and then I would actually have loved to have been there when that happened. I know everybody's talked about some sort of reality TV show in this industry. I don't know. Would it work? Would it not? That would have been a good day on the reality TV show. A lot of tools out there, Tim, have popped up to try and solve this time talent problem, right? Everybody promises. I mean, maybe the most abused phrase since I've been in the sandbox has been single pane of glass, or you know what I mean? Like, we've
Yeah.
all been sold a really crazy marketing message, right? That like every tool that you've ever walked through on the show floor will save your company oodles and oodles and oodles of time. Doesn't always work out that way. I like to call it trade show itis, right? Where you walk down the aisle and you just swipe and swipe and swipe, and then 6 months later you're like, I didn't even turn this on, right? Like, why am I still like, I gotta shut this off because it's not, nobody's doing anything with that.
And you see that. Here's the best thing. This is when you see the perfect instance. It's the companies that don't come out of MSPs, that don't know how understand how MSPs function, because they're like, oh, the cost of the product will drive the MSP to use it. No, they don't have time. Like, we talk all the time about, at an MSP, I want to be proactive. I'm going to be proactive. The problem is we have such a problem finding good labor, right?
Yeah.
Good people, right? And we're so busy putting out fires that we never really have time to get to true proactiveness.
I agree.
Without quite a bit of process, quite a few years, firing a few clients, getting a few clients, like that is a process. But these vendors that think, I'm going to sell you something, and because you're spending 10 grand a month, you're going to put it in. No, they're not. In 6 months' time, they're going to cancel the contract because they're annoyed they never put it in.
Well, in my opinion, and this isn't specific to our industry, more money, more problems. I mean, if there's somebody spending a lot of money on your technology solution, whatever it is, they have a high expectation, right? Real high. And like, they get really noisy very quickly, right? And like, car doesn't just drive itself here, right? Like, you have a very advanced solution. I assume it takes some sort of learning and to actually get it online, right? Because like, if your team doesn't know how to interact with whatever it is, it doesn't matter, right? So what does it look like from your perspective, from a PS standpoint, right? Like, what does that process look like from the time that they evaluated and they say, you know what, let's do this, to, hey, the car's running, I'm on the road?
Yeah, it's actually managing and setting the expectation, or setting and managing and remanaging the expectation, right? The expectation is, if I join an MSP initiative, I'm probably going to get, at some show, I'm probably going to see a pretty good time, some entertainment, right? Maybe some fire throwing, maybe something crazy, right? You never know what you're going to see.
I didn't even know about that one. Anyway, go ahead.
But
We'll talk
the
about that
point
a little
is
bit.
the expectation is you're going to have a good time,
Yes.
right? So, and people, the MSPs alone, like I talk about this all the time: contract, expectation setting, and managing. How often does the MSP meet with their client and say, this is what's in your contract? This is what you should expect. Because most of the time what happens is they meet with the client initially. When they sell them the contract, they set that expectation then, and then they never manage that and remanage that throughout the year. So inevitably what happens is something blows up and the client is like, you're responsible for that. And the MSP's like, no. And guess what you've just done? You've just ruined the relationship because you didn't take care of the client, because they didn't understand the expectation that you set, but you didn't manage.
Yeah.
Right. So now when you look at MSPs that transfer from the MSP world into the solution provider world, they know that, and they want to, they want to be ahead of that. So at PIA, set and manage the expectation. And like every new company, we've gone through a bunch of renditions of how do we do this and how do we do that. I think our onboarding right now is perhaps one of the best that I've seen. And the set expectation is, hey, we're going to get about 20% out of the gate of your help desk. Right. But
I mean,
over
it's still a
here,
good number, by the way. 20% is not bad.
But over the year, we want to get it 50. But we're
Okay.
not saying, I mean, when people hear me speak, I don't say 50. I say it takes us a year to get to 50 because we have to learn. We have to put new stuff into the programs. We have to do all this stuff, right? But when we're doing that, where does that start? That actually starts in the sales process to set that expectation, right? So what happens is when we onboard, we actually don't let the clients do onboarding. It's a horrible idea to let your clients onboard. Why? Because they don't have time.
Sure.
And it's just like when you buy a new house, you go in, you're painting the walls, you're like, oh, I love this place. Let's put the TV up. That wall doesn't get painted for a year.
Okay.
Same thing. 80% of that wall's painted. I guarantee you behind the TV, not painted.
Okay. So like, what do? You say, hey, just go plug this thing in over there and let it run? Like, how do they work with it?
Yeah. So we send them a script. And then based off that script, we get basically a 60 to a 90-day dump of their tickets.
Okay.
So we go through those. We do that, not the client. We do that. And then out of that, we actually come back to the client and say, hey, here's the things that we can help you with. Now we have 60 different solutions or package resolutions or ticket resolutions that's already written out. 5 of those may work for client A, 20 may work for client K, 10 may work for client Z. We have to look at that ticket dump. So we actually tell them before they ever sign, here's what P will actually do for you. And then when they sign, part of what we're doing when we go through that onboarding process that we perform is we identify 5 to 10. These are your top 5 problems. These are your top 10 problems. And then by the time they're onboarded, we have 5 to 10 of those actively working. So day one, they see ROI, right? So it's not like, let me give you the solution. It's going to take you 6 months to kind of put it in. It's not going to really look like that. No, we're somewhere around 30 days for an onboarding. I mean, they could do it much faster, right? But I don't want to hitch the engineers or I'll get a bunch of messages. But at the end of that, they're actually seeing ROI day one. They actually see how it interacts and it works day one. And then what we do is, because we understand that managers and owners are managing and owning. They're not in the tickets every day.
Right.
So what we do is in our portal, we actually provide them an adoption report. So they can go in and say, hey, you got 20 tickets a day. Pia worked 5. Pia could have worked another 5. Here's the 10 that didn't work. But we're actually showing them how to help their staff adopt to the software and use it. Now, the kicker is everybody wants the sauce. Well, the sauce is an AI engine that is proprietary. We don't really release that. But on the back end, there's an Azure instance that comes along. You see all of our scripts day one. What we Chat GPT, Google, whoever the crap you want will write you a script all day long. They're not as good as the guys that know how to write them because they always have to fix them, but they'll write them.
Sure.
Now, the crazy thing is we'll allow you to write your own script, throw it in our sandbox, of course, to make sure it doesn't break anything else, and then put it in your active environment. So that's where I'm talking about. The difference is we're setting the expectation. Let's review your tickets. Here's what it's going to do. Here's the things that we're going to get done during onboarding. And here's the performance day one. And then, of course, we continue to work with them as we progress in our relationship to make sure it maintains success.
That's interesting. I mean, basically what you've done is, hey, we're going to work back. We're going to work from the outcome backwards. And instead of you waiting for you to get time that you don't have, and start to figure out how to implement your platform into their world, you're like, nope, we're going to figure out what's actually happening in your world for you. And then we'll start working backwards from your actual workload until we show you the actual results. And then we'll progress from there. It's actually a pretty good idea.
Well, it's how do you, like, we buy so many solutions, and don't get me wrong, I'm just as guilty, right? Like I used to go to a show and be like, oh man, that is awesome. And then I take it back to the text and they'd be like, oh, that is crap. It looks really
Yeah.
pretty, but it sucks. But it's how do we make sure from the MSP perspective, because that's where our roots are, is that we're solving the issue we're actually talking about. And the only way to do that is to view that. Now, there's obviously some customization, right? If we're talking about a new user setup, client A is different from C, who's different from K.
Yeah.
Right. So we do spend time with each and every one of the MSP's clients to make sure they're tweaked just right so that they get that consistency every time. We say on average, we can do a new user setup in about 12 minutes if it's complicated. We say an easy one's about 7 minutes, right? There's all kinds of crazy. I mean, people don't understand how hard it is to change a last name. And for whatever reason, people decide not to be married anymore, and that's okay. They all have their reasons. But they're tired of that other person and they no longer want to be associated with that name. If you've ever tried to change a name across mass systems, it is horrible and everybody hates it. We have a package that actually does that. And then it turned around and does the dir sync on the back end so everything else gets hit. I mean, it's all about taking the minutia, the day-to-day, and making it easier for the MSP so they can concentrate on more important things.
So that you guys obviously have the guys in the background who are tweaking things, and as you're going through partner by partner, because the idea is that you're going to be able to do it faster than they're going to be able to do it.
Yep.
Got it. Because like, I think Tim put one of the problems is, and DevOps is a pretty word, but I would think one of the key problems of the RMM solution historically has been that people don't have the resources on staff to code the system to do what they want it to do. And you get the guys who are like the guy in high school, that guy, hey, you need to switch directions here. And like, that's his thing, but like, not everybody has that guy. And then they end up outsourcing that to somebody else because they don't have enough resources to make the machine run. And then there's been this argument, Tim, that like, is RMM even needed anymore? Like, is it still required in today's modern MSP? Some people say yes, some people say no. A lot of people are like, well, just go to Microsoft, let Microsoft do everything. And I'm like, I don't think Microsoft can do everything yet. So,
and you still got to manage it, right? Like you can certainly that was the big fight years ago, right? When we all went from on-prem or these weird hybrid things to Office 365, and oh my God, I got to reduce my costs because I'm no longer maintaining a server. No, you're still providing a service. You still have to manage that, right? I mean, that's something that's very much still in the day-to-day. So, that whole scenario is one of understanding that you're still providing a valued service that, quite honestly, your client can't do, and quite honestly, your client shouldn't do.
So, but to that point, would you position PIA as an RMM replacement? Or
absolutely not. No. Now, here's what's funny is we actually tried to integrate with almost every RMM out there. And the bottom line is because RMM does that polling technology, right? It's slow. Well, we can't do the slowness. We need it to be faster. So that's the reason why we have an agent that actually goes on the endpoint. George, are you there? Or am I there? I think I lost somebody. Or maybe I lost myself. Jen, am I on?
You're good.
George?
I think George is frozen.
All right, so I'll just keep yapping. So until he comes back. So we looked at doing the RMM technology, and quite honestly, it was just too slow. So if you see our stuff, we say that we do tickets 8 times faster. The reason why we can do tickets 8 times faster is because we're directly interacting with the endpoint, right? So that's the huge caveat to what we're doing. So if you ever see one of our demos, our technical people do 6 tickets in 12 minutes for 6 different companies. Like, we all know that that's super impossible for people to do. Why is that? Because you're sitting at your desk, you're banging the keyboard away, you're fixing something, and then inevitably one of the other techs comes up and says, hey, can you help me? And then somebody else interrupts you, and somebody else interrupts you. And I guarantee you at some point, the boss comes in and says, can you do this for me real quick? Well, what happens is that takes us off task. And then we have to go back and remember what we're doing. And we got 15 things in our head. We don't multitask that well. So we inevitably miss something. That's how we come up with licenses missing. That's how we come up with costs is still going against us. It just becomes this scenario where the human just can't keep up with the amount of stuff that's coming at them. So us having the ability to do that across multiple platforms is important. Now, we don't want to be an RMM. RMM holds a very specific ability, remote monitoring and management, right? We were missing that for years, and now we have it. So how do you patch? How do you update? How do you do a mass deployment of X, Y, or Z? If you don't have a specialized software, how do you pull inventories? All that is done through the RMM. So we're very much a difference between the RMM and PIA, just from a standpoint of the functionality that we're trying to do is 2 totally different things. So that's probably the biggest difference there. So since George isn't on, I can say go Kansas City and Chiefs are awesome and yada, 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 because I know he's going to hate that. So
I haven't heard anything from him, so I'm not sure.
yeah, he must have lost his internet or something, which is good. I mean, so it's one of those things where we can certainly keep going. Jen, this can be the Jen and Tim show. We don't need George. So as I'll just keep going and talk about, the importance of why MSPs should be looking at AI technology. And that's because what they should be doing is they should be leveraging new tools, right? So as an MSP, one of the things that we do every year, or we should be doing every year, is reviewing our stack, right? What are our tools doing? Are our tools by any means cross-functioning? Or do I have multiple capabilities of one instance in multiple tools? And how do I reduce that? The whole point of tools, the whole point of going to the shows like George was pointing out and looking at the shiny thing is how do we become more efficient? How do we essentially increase our ability to work and decrease our costs? And the bottom line is it's tools. Tools provide us that ability. So when we look at the way the industry is progressing, I talk about in one of my main speeches, I talk about how RMM was a huge shift in the industry for us. It's because it changed the way we did business. I talk about how going from the break fix model to the MRR model was immensely huge in our business. It stabilized our finances, but there were things that allowed us to do that. And part of that is tools. So when you're looking at your tool stack, you need to be looking at what's down the road, what's coming next. None of us want to be bleeding edge. We all know that, but we need to be cutting edge. When we're talking about stuff like AI and how AI works and products such as PIA, what you're looking at is how do you increase your efficiency? How do you increase your consistency and maintain a cost, or God forbid, become a little bit more profitable? And that's a big issue right now, because what we're seeing in our industry is we're seeing a massive labor shortage. So overall, there's a labor issue. And then in the industry, there's even a bigger issue for technical labor. So how do we circumvent that? Because as George was talking earlier, all these enterprise companies think they're going to come down and sell these solutions to the MSP world, but they don't really get the MSP world. He was really kind and said that, they'll hang around for about a year. We see them like 6 months, maybe 9 months, maybe. But what we know for a fact is that the enterprise businesses are looking to push more work down to the MSP level because our depth on our benches are so much more. Our knowledge is so much more that we have the ability to do all of this. So when we're seeing enterprise level come down, we're seeing our labor and our work and our increase in business go up. How do we adapt to that? It has to be tools. So AI tools allow people to become more efficient to save that labor, right? Because we want to talk about profitability. We can certainly talk about the profitability of the company, but more importantly, let's talk about profitability of your business and your contract. The only thing, or the main thing, that affects the profitability against contract is your labor. So how do you go about, like, we all know our tool costs, right? I could go to any large room of MSPs and say, what's your tool cost per user? Everybody will be able to tell me that. What nobody can tell me almost is your actual labor rates. What are you accounting for? Are they correct? And that's because it fluctuates depending on what their need is. So implementing tools like AI, implementing tools like PIA actually allow for you to get more consistency in those labor rates, which allows you to become more profitable as a business. And in the end, that's what we're trying to do, right? Because you need to take the people you have, those assets that you put all the time and sweat into, and you need to focus them, right, on more important tasks. We talk about having a seat at the table, but are we truly having a seat at the table if all we're doing is regurgitating some report that was created 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago? No, we need to actually help them. Where's your business going in the next year, 3 years, 5 years? Where's, how big do you plan on growing? Are you going to expand? Is there another building? Like budgeting, they need all that information. They're experts at what they do, and that's what they want to do, right? I always say, I had a client that they made dog food, right? Had another client that was a pediatrician, another client that was an electrician. Let me tell you something. They don't care. All they want is those systems to work so they can make dog food, so they can help fix babies, and that they can put electrical stuff in. That's what those clients care about. So the tools that we're using on the back end allow us to set the table and say, hey, how's business this year at the dog food factory? Are you guys picking up? Are you making more? Are your clients at the pediatrician, are you guys growing your clientele? Are you adding providers? Is there a new building project going on in your city that you have to add more people and expand your company? These are the conversations we want to have. The problem is we're spending so much time on the minutiae and the day-to-day and the help desk that we're unable to sit down and have those conversations because we just don't have time. So imagine if you had a product or a tool that removed 50% of that day-to-day noise and allowed you to focus on that relationship with the client, allowed you to take them to that next point. Imagine a client that doesn't have to get surprised in the middle of the year saying, hey, by the way, we got to buy a $15,000 piece of equipment. Those are things that it takes a human to actually look at and tell. There are tools to help them, but we all know when an engineer goes on site to a client they've been working on for years and says, hey, we've been stringing this thing along for years. You're at the end of the life. We need to look at replacing this in the next 6 months. Or, hey, by the way, here's your hardware cost or your software cost for the next year, right? Like, they can plan for that. They can budget for that. The problem is they don't have time to do that because they're too focused on putting out the fires in the day-to-day world. So AI is obviously where the thing's going. It wasn't but a year ago that, security was the hottest topic. You couldn't go up to a trade show and swing a rubber chicken without hitting a new security company. And AI has quickly surpassed that because that is the wave of the future. It is how we are going. It's not meant to replace people. It's meant to be a tool that allows you to free up time to do more important and critical things. So apparently he must be having some real issues.
I know. I haven't heard from him at all, which is no kind of update. but I appreciate you hearing the rest of this while he is figuring out what's going on with his Wi-Fi and whatnot.
Yeah, no worries at all. So it's been a good session, obviously. If George wants to jump back on and do something, just let me know. I'm more than happy to do anything with him. I appreciate everybody's time today. Everybody have a fantastic day and a great week. And we look forward to seeing you out down the road. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to give me a holler. And we're happy to answer those questions and help move you forward. With that being said, Jen, I think I'll let you have it. And if George needs something, just tell him to reach out and yell at me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you.